Grimgar of Fantasy Ash is the best isekai of all time, or is it? What's the best isekai then? ReZero, Mushoku Tensei, or maybe it's Slime or Shadow Eminence, or maybe it's Essay. Well, at the very least, Grimgar is an isekai of all time. It does deserve a place on the podium and is worth your attention. Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash was first published in 2013, with its anime adaptation coming 3 years later in 2016. Grimgar's story revolves around a group of people that wake up with no memories in the land of Grimgar and are essentially forced to become adventurers. Technically, they are volunteer soldiers, but they are essentially adventurers, and are left to fend for themselves. Join or die by starvation, essentially. Now, if you have any exposure to what Grimgar is, or have watched the anime, then you know what I'm going to say next. The thing that piques most people's interest in Grimgar is not the world or setting, which by all accounts are pretty good in terms of isekai standards, but that we follow the NPCs of the world rather than Kirito's Electric Boogaloo. Our main characters are a bunch of failed boys and girls. Basically, the hook of the series is seeing completely average people getting stronger and exploring the hostile world they woke up in. And since it's an isekai world, that means it comes packaged with a medieval era setting and magic, but with a slight twist. The twist on the isekai setting, besides the whole following the regis aspect, is that Grimgar is set up with Dungeons and Dragons mechanics. With these D&D rules, people in this world need to essentially character select. You get to choose your class and guild, for example, Thief Guild, Warrior Guild, Hunter, Dread Knight, Mage, and so on. You then get starter equipment and skills based on that class, but more on that later. For now, that's all you need to know. I'll try my best to keep this as story spoiler free as I can, however, there will be spoilers for places traveled, not that it tells you much, and heavy spoilers for what will be season 2 for the story section later. First, I'd like to start this overview not with a story synopsis, but with a little look into the journey aspect of its story. Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash's story can be best explained in one simple phrase: things happen. Now, to explain what I mean by that, in most light novels, or if you've ever read a manga weekly, then you are probably familiar with those novels or chapters where not too much happens because it's a setup chapter or book. Those just barely exist in Grimgar. The setup volumes of Grimgar are usually relegated to the first third of the novel itself, rather than the whole novel being a setup. There's no real setup volume except maybe one. Grimgar is at its heart a giant adventure that has no breaks. It feels like a D&D campaign where the DM is just throwing darts at a board, and that's how the next scenario is decided. Here are some examples of where those metaphorical scenario darts landed. We got a castle raid, dungeon crawling, playing a cheeky round of Civ 5, tomb raids, a pirate's adventure, a circus tent, how to train your dragon, and a whole faction is introduced with a leader orc named Jumbo that has a giant pet hawk. Jumbo the orc. Let that sink in. Not even being isekai'd again is off the table for this story. Now, you're probably wondering about some of the scenarios I just said. Like, a circus tent? That's weird. And yes, I agree with you. The best part of Grimgar is that even though I give a bunch of locations, the actual stories and plot development within those areas are rather exciting to read and experience since, well, like I said at the top of this section, things happen in every volume. Usually, a lot of things happen. The world building of Grimgar is quite well done, with every location having been hinted at before they actually come into the story, and each area feels like it belongs in the world and is cohesive. The world is large with many locations to explore and secrets to unravel throughout the group's travels. However grand the adventure it may be, Grimgar never lets you forget that our characters are in an unforgiving and hostile world that will kill most people if they mess up or have a passing in their judgment. Now, if any of that piques your interest, go read or watch the anime and then come back to this video. The world is interesting and worth exploring, even if our main characters might not agree wholeheartedly. Oh yeah, our main cast. Should probably talk about them. Let's meet the cast. We got main character, Mineta but worse than Ginger, the boy, waifu bait 1, 2, and 3, and dead. Yeah, that about sums it up. Let's start with reverse order of importance, though you could argue all are equally important except dead for obvious reasons, and this is just an arbitrary order I made up. Dead, real name Monoto, is only around for 4 episodes in the anime. He's the Kirito and priest of the group, good at everything and friendly to all in his party. He's the hard carry of the group, and that's about it for him as a character. However, later in the novels, it does expand on him as a character, and it makes him much more interesting on subsequent read-throughs and watches. The boy, real name Moguzo. Moguzo is the warrior of the group. He's your stereotypical giant with a gentle heart, one of the central pillars of the team and quite reserved and shy. He's great. Waifu bait number 3, real name Yume, the useless hunter of the group. She probably has the most jarring difference in mannerisms between her anime and novel counterpart that you'll definitely notice if this video spurs you to pick up the light novels. Besides the difference, she's your typical airheaded goofy character that doesn't really understand social norms and is lovable. She is great. Mineta but worse and Ginger, real name Ranta, he's the Dread Knight of the group. He's your typical weird pervy character that no one likes, hated not only by the reader, but also hated by everyone in the group, acting like an annoying DJ mostly. However, it seems to be more of a defense mechanism more than anything else. Still annoying though. He is interesting. He's interesting. Waifu bait number 2, real name Chihoru, the mage of the group. Typical shy, no confidence, wet noodle of the team. She's great. Waifu bait number 1, real name Mary, the priest of the team and replacement for Dead. She's your typical ice queen that is very strict with the team, that over time never loses her strictness but comes to care for the group greatly. She's great. Finally, Mr. Main Character himself, real name Haruhiro, the thief of the group. Lacking any self-confidence or self-worth whatsoever, self-deprecating to a very serious fault, average across the board, and thrust into the leadership position after Monta's death, something he himself finds to not be suited for. His leadership is painfully mediocre and lacks any qualities befitting a leader. However, that is just him in the beginning, and this segues to what I find is the crux and the most appealing aspect of the story, the ability to survive and move forward. Also, he's great. This idea of having the ability to survive and to see tomorrow is the most important thing and is present from the beginning of the series. Getting better armor and skills is important, but those are only superficial ways of powering up. I should probably address how they get stronger. In order to get stronger, our characters need to purchase skills from the guilds they chose to be able to do more moves. However, the interesting part is that skills in this world are more akin to learning how to dribble instead of a more meta system a la Danmachi or SAO, where you literally level up with a stat increase. Which makes it funny because most early skills are literally doing the pocket sand meme or cutting in a diagonal direction. There are skills that are more interesting and make you way stronger, but most are in the mundane category. Mundane skills aside, the most valuable thing in the world of Grimgar is surviving whatever situations you're put in and gaining the experience from it, even if you fail and barely escape with your life. Survive even if it's by luck alone. Every day, pushing yourself to the limit yet not past it, slowly gaining real world experience to be able to tackle much harder things. We even learn later in the novels that there's an in-universe explanation as to why guilds only teach mundane skills. It's because the way to power up further is to add all the experience and mundane skills you've learned and develop your own personal methods of fighting. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, that's obvious, that's how you usually get stronger in stories. Yet, in most isekai stories, we get a slight montage of training at most, and then they are one-shotting the big bads like it's nothing. Their basic skills don't evolve into anything stronger, it's just that the base power level of the character itself makes the basic move strong. It never feels like at any point that those characters are ever facing the consequence of death. That is why I enjoy this isekai almost as much as the greats like Mushoku Tensei or ReZero. In Grimgar, we see our party struggling with beginner level monsters, ending with their most competent party member dying to a lowly goblin in the beginning. But they recover from that loss and slowly get stronger. What takes average parties 2 weeks to become full-fledged volunteer soldiers takes Haruhiro and co. almost a month. The time it takes does not matter though. What matters is that they get to see tomorrow. This leads to Team Haruhiro getting bruised and battered in almost every single volume, and the biggest W's to take sometimes is just surviving. As an example of this just surviving W, it can be seen in what a lot of people consider their favorite part, Volume 3. Overview spoilers for this next section. Skip to this part if you wish to not be spoiled, just know it's very cool. Volume 3, or would it be Season 2, revolves around the team getting the chance to opt into a raid on Deadhead Keep, an orc-occupied keep. This being an optional choice, the incentive to get volunteers to join is a hefty payment for each individual. Some story shenanigans later, Team Haruhiro joins to test their abilities and as well as to receive the payment. The day of the raid arrives, and this is where the action skyrockets and never stops for the rest of the volume. The raid starts with the volunteer soldiers subduing enemy camps outside the keep, which then leads to a D-Day style rush of the castle with Team Haruhiro carrying the ladders that allow the volunteer soldiers to climb up the keep's walls. Plans are going somewhat smoothly until the final boss appears and starts massacring almost everyone, which leads to everyone fighting for their lives in absolute chaos, leading to an ending with consequences that are felt throughout many volumes going forward. But they survived the raid, and that's the most important outcome. Every action has consequences within the story, which in turn makes it interesting. Post the keep battle sometime in the future, Team Haruhiro gets to meet the most legendary volunteer soldier party, Akira's party. Titular Akira being lauded as the most legendary volunteer soldier. Haruhiro gets to have a conversation with Akira and his party. While the whole group is exceptional, fitting for the group named the most legendary party, all of Akira's party mates essentially dunk on Akira for being exceptionally cowardly and average when he first started, and for a good amount past that. Yet, as has been stated many times in the volumes, and in this video to this point, the only thing people need is time. He states that there have been many more talented people that would have gone much stronger than him, but they all died early, so that talent will never see its full potential. So instead, the title for most legendary landed on him and his achievements. Someone who was as mediocre as Haruhiro himself. all because he just got lucky and didn't die. At the end of this conversation, he just tells our hero he's just an average 40-year-old who's not that impressive. He then proceeds to go fight a giant crystal hydra with some ease. The world of Grimgar is cruel as it is beautiful. We watch as a group of 6 bumbling losers struggle and slowly become better. It is a very fulfilling thing to watch the party become better, yet they never overlevel to where all the tension is gone. If anything, they're usually underleveled to where they go, and at best they are on equal footing, meaning any mistake could be fatal. That feeling progression urged me further to keep reading. The world and time in Grimgar is not static. In many isekai, and really anime in general, we watch the same 14 to 16-year-old kid never grow up and then watch them spout some philosophy that would never come out of a teen's mouth. We watch the party physically grow older, unlike in something like My Hero, where the whole story is taking place within 1 year of high school. Whereas in the current volume, the entire cast is now in their early 20s. Look at my boy Haru and his glow up. I mean, they even make Ronta look cool. Yumi goes from airhead to older, sad, depressed airhead. I mean, this probably comes from the illustrator's art just improving, coupled with probably a change in design philosophy, with the unintended effect being that the characters look different and older due to the change of art style. It is probably a mix of intentional and unintentional. Either way, it does benefit the story and it's pretty cool. The party itself changes and expands due to varying circumstances due to passing of time. Their mental and character growth also reflects this aging of the character and life experience and is very natural and fulfilling to see. I'll only highlight one character here to give an example and I'll keep it short. The problem child himself, Ronta, since he's easily the biggest problem in the beginning of the story. Ronta goes from being the most insufferable character to someone you can understand and even root for, if only at the lowest possible bar. He essentially gets the Bakugo character arc treatment. All the members get their due diligence. Its message that all of us can get better with enough time is really something to behold. No matter how mediocre you are at the beginning, with enough days, time, and dedication, we can all become something we're proud of, even if you do not become the number 1 in that activity. Now, there's a reason why I said that it's not the best isekai. Grimgar, like everything in the world, is not perfect and has its faults. I'm going to mainly talk about the light novel in this section, but to touch on it briefly, the anime had pacing issues and some weird musical placement. Now to the light novel. The light novel is written weirdly. I am no light novel connoisseur, but I have read my fair share, and Grimgar is the most odd. Grimgar was a light novel decided to pick up after having read Mushoku Tensei. Felt like going from reading, in terms of ease, a YA novel to sudden reading a stream of consciousness from the 1800s. That is not to say that the writing is bad, because it's not. It really does feel like you're in an average person's head who's always stressed and on edge. This works to its benefit and detriment. Some scenes drag a little long due to the style of writing. This is where I remind you who our protagonist is. A dude who lacks any sort of self-worth or confidence in himself. Sometimes you'll get a few too many paragraphs lamenting about how much he sucks and does not believe in himself, or wants whatever's happening to be over. So, basically a weeb's internal thoughts. This gets so bad in a certain volume that many stop and take a break when they get to it. I also felt that well when I got to it. It also has some romantic subplots that are present in the story. While not bad, you can definitely tell the author's strength is in writing dungeon crawling and fighting fantasy monsters. While this is a part I laud and praise, many might find issue that there's no plot. While there is an overarching story and endgame that is relevant and not forgotten, most of the time it's in the background because, like I said, things happen and our harder group of volunteer soldiers usually have more pressing issues directly in front of them. They don't have time to worry about being proverbial heroes that need to save the world. They're usually too busy just staying alive. Just wanted to mention it since I do see that criticism brought up from time to time. Despite its problems, Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash is a series well worth your time. This series is a roller coaster with no breaks that gives out mysteries and intrigue, taking us on an adventure across the lands of Grimgar that is filled with enemies and allies alike. It is a story with consequence for our characters that actually matter. A story where its main message is to be grateful to be alive because it allows us a chance to become better every day. To never stop struggling if it's hard or it just plain sucks, because who knows, maybe in 1, 2, 5, 10 years, it'll be probably pretty cool if you keep at it every day. Grimgar is a series worth reading for the journey alone just to see all the crazy things our party gets up to. At the time of writing this, the series has not yet concluded, with volume 19 being the last one released in 2020. Will we actually get another volume before the end of the year? Will the series end in a raging dumpster fire, or will it stick the landing, rewarding all 12 of us who kept up with it? I don't have any answers to these questions, but I'm staying on this ride until the end just to see the conclusion of this long journey, if we even get one. And I hope you join me. Thank you for watching and reaching the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing. Let me know what you think of Grimgar, if you plan to read it or have already read it. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Till next time.